I've seen companies literally going bankrupt because they chose the wrong software. That's how big this decision is. That's the biggest problem that Software Finder resolves, because we are not matchmaking for buyer's benefit. We are also matchmaking for vendor benefit as well, because now they're targeting the right buyers that they should be targeting from the start. And their pipeline is filled with buyers that they should be selling at.
Hi, and welcome back to SaaS Half Full, the only show serving B2B SaaS marketers. I'm Lindsay Groper, EVP of PanBlast, and I will be both your host and bartender today. I had a great conversation with Adnan Malik, who is the CEO and co-founder of Software Finders. Now, his team approached us about a topic that is near and dear to our hearts because we have been talking about it night and day for the last year, which is building trust and the importance of trust in B2B selling, specifically as it relates to this environment of high mistrust. So if you care to, grab a drink and join me as I speak with Adnan. Hi, Adnan. Welcome to SaaS Half Full.
Hi, thank you for having me on the show.
We're excited to have you. I was glad that your team approached us about the possibility of you being a guest on SaaS Half Full, and specifically the topic that you wanted to talk about, because it is something that has been swirling with our agency, with our clients, which is this idea of trust being the new currency in today's B2B environment. Things are all jacked up over the last couple of years with the introduction of AI, and we're kind of getting back to the basics in what builds trust and what builds credibility and actually wins deals today. So totally resonated with us, was glad that they reached out. As our listeners know, one of the things that I do on this show is I share a drink with the guests on my show. But when we talked to your team, they said, listen, Adnan travels all the time. We have no clue where he's going to be a month from now. So we did not send you a kit, which is okay. I always stay true to the process. So I will be having a beverage. And I think you were just having a lovely glass of water with me today. Yes?
That is right. I'll enjoy my water. And because of the travel plans, it was hard to coordinate where I'm going to be in today's interview. But
worries.
I'm happy to be here.
Cool. Well, I'm going to crack open a Mamitas, which is a canned tequila and lime. And, it's noon Eastern time. So it's a respectable enough hour on a Thursday. So cheers. Nice to meet you.
Cheers. Nice to meet you too.
Well, before we dive into our topic of the day, Adnan, I want to give our listeners an understanding of who you are, a little bit on your background, and then certainly what you do at Software Finders and why Software Finders exists, just to give our listeners context. So dive in, give us a little bit about you.
Sure. So the Software Finder, we started back in 2019. So it's almost seventh year. Been in the business. So before Software Finder, I used to work for multiple different SaaS companies. And towards the tail end of my career as an employee, I was helping companies with their marketing and sales pipeline building. And at that point, we realized and identified that there are not many marketplaces out there that is truly helping buyers find the right software. What it means is if I'm a company looking for a particular software, and can be anything like HR, CRM, project management, whatever software need that has arise, then there are not many places where I can go, or a company that can really help me shortlist without any biasness the top 3 or top 5 software that I should be looking at in a very crowded space. And that's when the idea clicked. And we then started to work on the idea in 2019. And here we are, 7th year. We are almost 350 employees and growing at 100% rate year on year for the last 5 years. Basically, in a nutshell, Software Finder helps buyers when they're looking for software in shortlisting top 3 to top 5 software companies that they should be looking at. The service is absolutely free for the buyer, and we charge vendors for the service. For buyers, it takes anywhere from 6 weeks to about 8 weeks just to shortlist and set up demos when they're doing this research. And with only 10-minute phone call to Software Finder, we cut down their 2 to 3 month research time to only 10 minutes. So that's a huge value to the buyer. And it's a great service for the vendors as well, because through us, they get the right buyers that they should be selling their SaaS software to. to start with. And because we're spending time with the buyer, we're spending about 10, 15 minutes on the phone, identifying their needs, and then connected them to the right buyer that is suitable for the features they're looking for, the size of the company, the industry they operate, and most importantly, the budget they have. So considering all of their requirements, we then connect them with the vendors, and then the vendors take over, and then we are normally not part of the sales process.
Sure, that makes sense. So I think when most people think about vetting software companies of a certain category, they automatically think, hey, well, like reviews. So the G2s, the Capterras, the Trust Radius. This is different from that in that you're getting a human being who is consulting you based on your needs and coming up with real human recommendations. It's not necessarily based on reviews. It's more based on need. Is that correct?
That is correct. I mean, having said that, we also have a review platform. I mean, Software Finder is a review platform as well. So we gather reviews, buyers leave reviews on our platform, which really helps other buyers. But we are not a review-only platform like G2 or Capterra. Primarily G2 is just more review-driven, but we do a lot more than reviews. So we help them compare different software. We help them with the pricing of the software. We help them look at the demos for the software. And then there's a lot of other buyer sentiment that we collect, that we share on our website. So there's a lot of content on the website that attracts buyers to come to Software Finder. But yeah, it's not only review based. There's a lot more that going on. And then plus a human approach, which no other marketplace offers, which basically is, I would say, the biggest differentiator between us and other marketplaces. That our advisor basically speak to them, spend time, and really help them narrow down their decision, which is the absolute value that we offer, which was missing when we started Software Finder.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not lost on me that you are helping people find software with humans, because that is not the conversation at all today. It is quite the opposite of leveraging AI and building agents to do those things for you. So let's talk about this current environment and building trust, building credibility. As someone who has been leading up a PR agency for all of my career, I do laugh a little bit, this sort of renaissance of storytelling, trust, and credibility, because we've been standing on the mountaintop shouting this since the beginning of our industry, but it's definitely back in a big way. And I feel like if you talk to any leader of a company, they're all going to say that trust matters, right? No one's going to tell you, no one's going to disagree with that. However, most growth strategies still are really centered on speed, scale, and that's what they're rewarded on, conversion rates. So where do you think that B2B companies are really fooling themselves when they say that we're all about buyer trust?
A lot of B2B companies, buyer trust to start with is really important because, in today's world, trust is becoming more and more important, especially after AI. Trust is becoming a big question. We're dealing with human AI, and, how can we really trust AI versus humans, versus so many other parameters it's creating in the last few years. But for any B2B company, trust obviously is a major thing. Forget about B2B companies. I mean, in today's world, if you're buying a very, you're going for shopping and you're doing online shopping, everyone read reviews when you're even spending $50 or $100. And those trust on Amazon and other places is so important that everyone goes after. But on a B2B scale, the intensity of the buying decision is so high because it matters so much. And I'll give you an example. So let's say if you are a 30-employee company, you're trying to implement a new marketing automation tool, for example, and if it will probably take you 2 to 3 months to choose the tool, then it will take you another few months to implement, to train your users. So, any SaaS B2B purchase that you make, you go live in 3 to 6 months. Right. And then you truly start using the tool the way it should, maybe in 6 to 9 months. There's a lot of learning curve and the way you set up things. And then if you choose the wrong tool and you realize this after 9 months down the line, license cost, I always say, is the cheapest cost that you'll be spending in that decision. Most of the cost is going towards change management, training, all the hassle that you go through. License cost might be $400 a user per month, but you're spending maybe $2,000 just to, making sure the user is using it the right way. So there's a lot of hidden cost. And what we see is 70% of the buyers, they are dissatisfied from their purchase. 70%. It's such a big number. And why? Because first of all, they're shortlisting the wrong tools to start with. And then because they're shortlisting the wrong tools, so, they will end up making a wrong purchase, because there's always a pressure to make a purchase. So the whole B2B buying journey is not set up the way it should have from the start. And I think that's where the software finder is playing a big role, that we want to present the right companies in front of the audience. And because of our human-driven approach, their trust automatically becomes the most important factor, because now there's a human who they've spoken to 15 minutes, who are telling them, why they should be looking at the 3 or 5 companies that they should be looking at. Once the vendor goes in the sales cycle with these buyers, they're trusting them more because it's been recommended by an advisor, an independent advisor who didn't charge them anything to give this advice, and gave them reason that why you should be looking at these 3 companies versus other in their phone call. So I think overall, this immensely increased the trust. I mean, everyone knows these days, if you just Google top 3 HR software companies, whoever is paying the most will be showing up on top on Google. So on the B2B side, I mean, they trust Google, but not at the level that they should be, because they know these companies have the more marketing budget. Is it the right company for what I'm trying to purchase is a big question mark. And I think that's where we're filling that gap.
Well, and we're seeing also, and the data shows that like 1 in 3 people will trust the AI overview at face value.
Yeah.
And use that as a trust shortcut. I was just on the phone with someone yesterday, a prospect of ours. I said, how did you find us? And they said, oh, we just asked Claude and you all came up, which is great. But they said, and so we just use that list just as our list.
Yeah.
And in my head, I'm like, oh, I'm glad that we surfaced. But on the other hand, you shouldn't just take that at face value.
Yeah, exactly.
Those that have surfaced. So there's all these trust shortcuts that people are taking. And I think specifically when it comes to a, crowded SaaS market, when you're looking at vendors, it's pretty overwhelming, because if you're looking at a specific category, you mentioned HR tech, and let's say maybe it's a applicant tracking system. So like you're going in the ATS category. A lot of these vendors sound identical. So what are the things that you think build trust for a brand early on in that buyer research cycle? And I guess conversely, what are some things that you think instantly will undermine that?
Yeah. So, I mean, ATS is a good example. So let's say if you're in, talent acquisition team and you're looking for a new ATS software, then again, most buyer, what they will do is they will do Google, rely on AI overview or ChatGPT or Claude. That's where the search will start. I mean, there is no doubt about it. That's where everyone in today's world will start their search. The good thing is that Software Finder has been cited at most of these LLMs and AI overviews. So we get a lot of traffic from there as well. But as the example that you mentioned, they can easily just find an ATS software and reach out to them directly. So in their research phase, these LLMs and searches obviously plays a big role. And people trust blindly to the top 3 or top 5 that they're seeing in those lists. And again, I say LLMs to be glorified SEO, and then sooner you will start to see ads there too. So whoever can pay the most will start appearing, and then you will be just going to companies who has the most marketing dollars, and that's the game. But are those the right companies is a big question mark. And because it's such an important decision, just imagine if you implement the wrong ATS, the impact is going to have, it will impact your talent acquisition pipeline. It will, you probably won't be hiring the right people because the tool is not helping you. It can be multiple reasons. In initial research phase, I would say use marketplaces, read the reviews, make sure just don't blindly trust on the top 3 that you see on a list. Read reviews, maybe do a deep search on LLMs that is backed by user review sentiments, and then speak to an advisor before you reach out to the companies. Because, I mean, if you're going to Software Finder or, just hire a consultant or do your due diligence, because that money invested will pay off in a big way because, as I said, you cannot calculate cost of implementing the wrong tool in the B2B industry. So don't just blindly trust the list and start reaching out to companies, because as a human, you're not going to be reaching out to more than 3 to 5 companies. It's not humanly possible. You're not going to be reaching out to 20 companies and do your evaluation. I've never seen that happening.
Yeah.
So it's that's why I spend more time in the research phase. And then once you have that trust, then reach out to the top 3 or top 5 after going through a process, rather than just blindly going through the Google list or Claude list.
Yeah. It makes me wonder where we're going to end up in terms of trusting the LLMs. And as this evolves, in my same conversation, the person said, well, I said, do you have any questions? It said, well, and the person said, well, Claude told me that I should ask. And I'm like, what are we doing here? I think, what questions do you have? Like, you don't have to tell me that Claude told you. Yeah. Like, that's where we are. It's just so common now that it's like, well, of course, the bot told me that I should ask these questions, so I'm asking them. Where are we headed? Where will we end up? And to your point, it's, it is a bit of a big black box right now in terms of how you're actually supposed to optimize the LLMs and what sources that they're pulling. But what the research does show is that people do trust more brands that they have heard of. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're a trustworthy brand, but if they see your name pop up on an AI overview, and then they see you organically, and then you're on LinkedIn and they see your thought leader on LinkedIn coming from that organization, they see it even at, display ads, they see you at events. It doesn't mean they trust your brand, but they inherently know your brand. And that's sort of like one of these other like trust shortcuts that we talk about, is like, okay, there's a lot of information. I see a lot of companies, but I've heard of these guys, so I'm going to include them on my list, which makes it challenging for marketers, right? Because it's like, boy, where do you spend your dollars? You do have to be everywhere. Do you feel like, and I'm going to go into the more of the marketing function, but do you feel like sort of this overly insanely optimized B2B demand gen engine is just like fundamentally misaligned with building trust, because they are like optimizing for leads versus optimizing for buyer confidence? So like, how do you see modern marketing struggling or playing into this era of mistrust right now? Are they feeding it? Are they fueling it, or are they doing it any favors?
For marketers, it's mostly about lead generation, as you rightly pointed out, because that's where your ROI starts to drive. But modern marketers, they spend a lot in terms of building content and building overall brand, which, I mean, at times what I've started seeing, CMOs started realizing that there was a study I was reading that they cut down on 20% of their lead volume, and they're spending more towards, writing more content and appearing in more places. And that branding is helping them close more deals. So overall, they're closing more deals by generating lesser leads. So it's changing, I would say. It's not only about lead gen, and buyer trust is important, and buyer trust what they read and what they see. A lot of this is shifting towards branding and having the right content in place. Giving buyer what they need is, they need knowledge and they need advice at the point when they're in the research stage, which is not biased, which is not ads driven. And buyers are very knowledgeable these days. If you go to a website, you can quickly tell, if it's biased or if it is independent review or what is the content writer is actually trying to do. I mean, 50 to 60% of the time people now can identify, because this has been happening for 15, 20 years. This is not a new phenomenon. So it's important for vendors to be focusing more on writing genuine content, helping the buyers out, having themselves placed where buyers are coming, list themselves on marketplaces, build reviews. I mean, just think about what Amazon has done on the B2C level and what other marketplaces has done on that level. So it's important for vendors to not just focus on lead gen in today's market, which I've already seen has started happening. Like, bring themselves top of category spots. Your best of articles should be mentioning you, that you're one of the best vendor and why you are best, for which ICP your software is best at. That's the signals that can really help you not only generate the right amount of pipeline, but to close more deals, because now you're targeting buyers that you should be selling to, and buyers are now trusting you more because they came through a proper process in your pipeline.
Yeah, I agree. I want to switch gears and talk a little bit about consultative selling, because you have built your business on that, which I love. Can you define consultative selling for us? Let's start there, and then I have some follow-up questions.
Sure. So basically, most of the time, B2B buying or selling is happening online. People read content, they try to gauge what are the top 3 or top 5 or top 7 that software that I should be looking at, with everything that we have discussed in the last 10, 15 minutes through that process. And then they start reaching out to vendors. And I think that's where the biggest gap is, because they are relying too much on online content, and they're not really speaking to a human who who has gone through top 100 software. They have done their research. They know which feature is made for which company. And, for 100 employee company, there's, there are better tools than, your 500 employee company or your 5,000 employee company. In terms of budget, not every buyer will have the same amount of budget. So you might be wasting a lot of time reaching out to wrong companies and realizing that, you're not the right fit for them. The software is not the right fit for you. And that's where the consultative selling plays a massive role. So our advisors, they go through a lot of training, they go through vendor demos, they have pricing, comparison, all of that information that is basically driving their phone call with the buyer when they're speaking to them. So when they're on the phone with the buyer, they enter all the buyer's requirement in the system, which is internally built. And I mean, we're not only relying on advisor brains that, they remember everything. Humanly not possible to know top 200 vendors on top of your head. So all of that information goes to our system, and alongside with their own experience and knowledge, they use this built-in system that is guiding them that, as per their needs, these are the top 5 or 10 software that they should be looking at, and why they should be looking at those software, depending on their budget, features, if they're trying to switch, or if this is the first time they're implementing something. Every small detail. And then the other most important thing is that asking the right question, because buyer at times doesn't know what their requirements are. And you need to ask the right question just to get more and more information. That information they will never feed into an AI, or they will never feed to Google. That's why it is important for a human to converse with them in a consultative way, to ask the right questions, and then better understand their requirements, and then tell them the top 5 that they should be looking at. And that's what consultative buying and selling is in this space.
Yeah, I can relate to that, because as a PR services company, we know we're not a one-click buy button or one-click download. So we have to have the conversation. And I think about the sales conversations that I've been in with vendors when I'm being pitched, like software vendors to me or selling to our agency. Some of the best ones are where it ends in a no sale, where the rep says, you know what, based on what you've told me, we're not the right fit. I love that. And the brand for me, the brand strength goes up significantly when that's the outcome of the call, because we've talked about it. And I've sort of expressed like, I'm not sure if we would really get value out of this. And they'll say, you know what, I don't think we're the right fit. And like, to me, that's awesome, right? Those to me are the best types of conversations, because it is true consultative selling, even if it's the best consultative selling, even if it doesn't ultimately end in a sale for you. That the affinity that someone's going to have for your brand is pretty high when that happens. And hopefully you guys have all experienced that, because I have a couple times, and it's always like super refreshing when it does. What can marketers do? You had mentioned that there's obviously a lot of wasted conversations, a lot of wasted leads that just really aren't a fit. So what do you think marketers should be doing should they be challenging leads a bit more, qualifying them more before they get into those sales conversations? What can marketing do to help that?
Yeah, so that's a good question. And I think you're missing a very important point in this whole question. It's good that you got the experience where the salesperson denied that, we're not the right fit for you. This only happens 20% of the time, maybe 30% of the
not
time.
often.
70% of the time, exactly. 70% of the time, sales have their targets. They have small pipeline from where they need to achieve their target. So 70% of the time, they will end up selling you the solution, knowing that you're not the right fit and hoping that, you become the right fit in the long run.
So that's
And
no
that is
longer
the
their
biggest
problem, right? Too. It's
yeah,
like,
it's not. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's client success
good luck,
problem.
guys.
Yeah, yeah. So what end up happening is the company spend all the money acquiring the customer, and they see a huge amount of churn because of this reason. And so a company in general is not happy after selling to the wrong buyer, and then on the buyer end, it's a nightmare because they will realize this 6 to 12 months into the buying journey that they made the wrong decision, and it's too late. And I've seen companies literally going bankrupt because they chose the wrong software. That's how big this decision is. That's the biggest problem that Software Finder resolves, because we are not matchmaking for buyer's benefit. We are also matchmaking for vendor benefit as well, because now they're targeting the right buyers that they should be targeting from the start, and their pipeline is filled with buyers that they should be selling at. So to answer the second part of your question, that what marketers should be doing, marketers should be doing this rather than just filling up the pipeline. They should be filling up the right pipeline for the sales. So their ICP needs to be well defined. They should not be just marketing everything and try to get anything when it comes to the lead pipeline. They should be asking the right question before they hand it over to the sales. And they should be, using services like Software Finder, who can really help them find those bottom of the funnel sales ready leads through a consultative approach that their team do not need to do. And if a buyer is coming from a consultative approach in the marketing pipeline, then they're saving a lot because their conversion rates are higher now because they're pitching to the right buyers.
Right. Well, Adnan, what haven't we tackled about this topic that you want to make sure and cover today?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, this is a really, really good topic. I love this topic because it's changing so fast in today's industry, and with the AI, it's the whole market is shifting very quickly. It's hard to. I mean, you build for something, and 3 months down the line, it's just something new. I mean, back in the days, you had years to plan, but now it seems like that you have months to plan because it's changing so fast. And it's in the marketing world, things doesn't happen so fast. Like, you need to analyze, you need to create your campaign. It takes months. You need to design in the right way. And then by the time you end up making something really nice, you see there's some new shift that's happening. So I would say that marketer needs to change the way things used to happen. I think speed is very important in today's world. Plan for smaller things, execute them quickly, test them out, and then build on that. And have your research hat always open, and not open, like have your research hat always on, and make sure that there's someone who's researching how the buyer journey is shifting from one tool to another. I mean, it used to be just Google. It was so easy for 15 years. You just building for Google. But now there's so many LLMs you don't know. And every LLM seems to be doing things in their own way. So it's not easy for marketers these days. It's shifting. The way LLMs are going to be presenting information is shifting. Sooner or later, there's going to be ads that's going to start appearing on LLMs. That's going to be a totally new thing that we as a marketer needs to plan. It's interesting times, but make sure that you're researching, have someone continue to research, plan things in a monthly fashion rather than quarterly fashion, and execute them, and keep buyer trust in the center of everything that you're building. Because it's not only about lead generation, it's think about branding, and think about how your brand is going to be out there, because that will play a big role in terms of improving your conversion rates from lead to sales.
Absolutely. And I would take it a step further. You said it's not easy to be a marketer right now. I would say it's brutal to be a marketer right now. It is, as someone who markets our own agency, and I'm just scratching the surface.
Yes, it is.
It is a whole new frontier, and everything that we have traditionally known, optimized for, relied on has been turned on its head. And you know, it's all gonna, the ship will right itself. There will be a point where this all just evens out and it starts to make sense to everyone, and it's less black boxy. But right now it's pretty insane. But everyone's out there just doing the best that we can. Thanks again for listening to SaaS Half Full. That was a great conversation with Adnan. I hope you enjoyed it. Maybe took 1 or 2 things away from that conversation that you can apply right away. We always appreciate the listen. And until next time, bottoms up.